Aramis Hamer, and I'm a visual artist. I find inspiration everywhere. Definitely music, nature, astrology. I feel like I'm a hippie girl through and through, you know. Spirituality is a huge thing for me, and just my experience as a Black woman. I love painting big. Actually have like a mural background. So I start with a canvas roll and I staple it onto the wall in my studio. I love using every color in the rainbow. I usually pour paint on the ground and it gets very messy, but when I do murals, then I'll use spray paint. But for the most part, it's acrylics, and I say that I paint colorful cosmic queens because I just love identifying Black women in this strong goddess role and this strong regal beauty that I feel like we embody. I try to translate that on the canvas, but I use different colors. So she'll be purple, she'll be blue, she'll be green, just because it's like, why not? It's fun. COVID was such a mixed bag. It was really a mixed bag. I'm grateful for the time that it allowed me to slow down, to reflect, to have that like introspection moment to be like, what do I want to do? You know, like now I think that it granted me that time to reflect, at the same time increased my exposure to the world through the Black Lives Matter mural. COVID was actually kind of a good time for the arts and for the artists. I felt like people realized how important art was when their concerts was taken away, when performances were taken away. You know, it was like, oh my God, like everything that I enjoy in the arts that brings me joy is now taken away. And I think people had a realization like, oh wow, I actually really am sad that I missed this performance, you know? And people also looked around their home and realized, I have no art up. You know, like people really started to cherish their home and like use it as the sanctuary that it is, because we was sitting at home. We weren't really doing anything. And so I felt like as an artist, as a Black woman artist, existing in 2020 during the Black Lives Matter movement, there was this awakening that took place that was really bittersweet. I'm grateful for the level of awareness that people had and the appreciation for the arts. So I felt like I was able to benefit in that way while still trying to cope like we all were, you know? So it felt like a juggling act. It felt like, ooh, this is good. There's more exposure from my art, and people are now like recognizing our creative practice, and people are now giving more Black artists and Black women platforms. But did it have to be at the sake of Black people being murdered in the streets and like a global pandemic taking, you know? It was just like, it makes me feel weird to celebrate the positive that came from it while still mourning the time that it did bring, which was hardship. Mm-hmm. I love creating. I love bringing joy through art. And so even though things get heavy, I feel like bringing color to dark spaces is how we transform, is how we alchemize it. So I felt like even during those times, it inspired me to create even more. When I look back on it, I'm grateful for the systems that I put in place before the pandemic that allowed me to benefit from people shifting online. Like I had already had my social medias in place. I already had started a YouTube channel. I already had my stuff online on my online shop. It felt like a perfect timing of everything to come together. And it felt like a nice time for me to benefit from the seeds that I planted years ago. I felt like there was an outpouring of love and support for the arts in Seattle. I just can't help but realize the privilege that it even takes to be aware of some of the resources. Like some people just aren't familiar about different grants that's here, or different, like small business grants or like artist grants that were provided by like Artist Trust or like Office of Arts and Culture. I also just acknowledge that artists, we sensitive people, you know what I mean? So it's like emotionally we're trying to manage things like we're all right. I also try not to be like, oh, it's artists, we're empaths, we're these sensitive things. It's like, okay, everybody's struggling, So it's like, yeah, we were all struggling, but to still try to have these experiences, these hard moments with your mom or like loved ones, people who caught COVID, people who had lost lives, while still trying to apply for this grant and submit your application and compete with all the other thousands of artists who's trying to get this $1,000 grant. There were opportunities, but they were very competitive just because we all needed resources and we all needed help. There was also this side of, because people wanted to like flood the city with art, because of course like plywood was going up. People were like boarding up the city. I mean, because it was protests going on, right? So people were like breaking windows. Just Capitol Hill was rough during that time. It was really rough, and small businesses experienced a lot of vandalism, a lot of property damage, to be real, and so they reached out to artists to create murals. And so what kind of came from that was like a walking gallery. You could walk down Capitol Hill and it was just all these murals that just lined the streets. That was just so beautiful. It was this interesting relationship where people wanted murals up to protect their small businesses, but also they didn't have the resources to properly pay artists for some of those murals. So there were like a lot of murals that were done just on a DIY level. It was just like, it's like, hey, so it was just this whole network of muralists and street artists just trying to make it work, and we all trying to pay bills. And yeah, somebody needed to have the money. So it's like, y'all, it's like we all can't be broke out here, so it's like the small business owners, they were losing money because their property, their businesses were closed. As artists, we understood that they didn't have the funds to properly pay artists, but then also artists didn't have the funds. So it was just like this chain of like, bruh, help me out. I'm just so grateful for community, because at the end of the day, we all like came together during such a dark time, and we were all struggling, but we were all together in our struggle, which for some reason made it a lot less painful. The real part is that a lot of those small business owners didn't come back. So some of those businesses didn't reopen. And then some artists moved away or just didn't have resources to even stay in the city. It was like this sort of scattering took place where people was just like, okay, I'm either going back to the East Coast or I'm like moving away, or like just had to go into survival mode financially, mentally, spiritually. In Seattle, we definitely need more art spaces. We need more studio spaces for artists to create, and where they're affordable spaces. Now, we definitely have them. We have the Hiawatha Lofts, the TK Artist Loft. We have different spaces, but they are extremely competitive. I've had friends on those wait lists for 2, 3, 4 years. In a city full of artists and full of creators, we need space. So it's like, if I can't afford to live, then I definitely can't afford a studio space where I have to pay this like monthly rent. I think we do great with like displaying art and art events and like different spaces, but for artists to have like a private space to be able to create is really important. We're still recovering. We're still recovering in the art scene, and we're also still recovering socially. I know I'm still recovering socially. I actually get energy from people, but the pandemic really flipped the script. It flipped the script for me. That was new. I was like, oh, is this social anxiety? Like, am I clenching? I used to like expand and open up, and I definitely feel myself coming back, but the pandemic shut me down socially in a way that I didn't even know was possible. And so now 3 years later, I'm trying to like force the flower back open. Like, you're trying to pull the petals back and be like, show up, like people are out, there's events to come on, but you're still like, should I hug you? It's still just socially awkward. And so the pandemic affected so many relationships and so many different interactions with people that it definitely affected the art scene. I think over time, maybe it could get back to a place where artists can get back connected, but I think we're just in a transition phase right now.